The second half of our SEC prediction starts right now. Welcome, everyone, to Touchdowns to Home Runs, early SEC 2021 prediction show. We've done the whole first half of the SEC. Everyone, we did Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, LSU. Those are the first seven. We're going in alphabetical order. And next up, this is a tough one to decide between who's next up because you call them the Ole Miss Rebels or the Mississippi Rebels. I'm going by Mississippi, so we go Mississippi, Mississippi State, Missouri. Then who do you go? You go South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and that's how we're going to finish it off. It's going to be a great couple of videos coming up your way. And if you haven't watched the first ones, first of all, if you have watched the first seven, I appreciate your guys' support of these videos. Has been so much fun. I've had a blast doing them, and it seems like you guys really love watching them. So if you haven't already, do me a favor, go hit that like button down below. And if you haven't subscribed already, I'm telling you, you will love this channel. This is the channel for you. If you love SEC football, hit that subscribe button as well. Comment anything. And I'm excited to get into this video. Ole Miss, a team that I was super high on this season. Last season, I wasn't super high going into the season, but as I gradually started to watch them throughout the season, Ole Miss was one of the most surprising teams in the SEC, one of the most fun teams for me to watch as an SEC fan. Their offense, just watching Lane Kiffin go up against some of the teams in the SEC West, like you had Alabama played an amazing game against his former employer. You had some amazing games that Ole Miss played, and just what he was able to do in his first year, really impressive, and I think is an amazing sign for where Ole Miss football is going in the coming seasons. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see where Ole Miss ends up in the next couple years, because I honestly think that Ole Miss is going to be a pretty good football team. So without further ado, let's get into these predictions. But before we start off with the predictions, of course, we got to get into how Ole Miss did last year. Let's take you to that right now. So Ole Miss Rebels 2020 football, how did it start out? They started out with the loss against Florida. It was the first game of the year for Ole Miss and Florida. As the first week of SEC football. Florida was a really good team last year. We all know that. We all know how good Florida's offense was, and I think that's really what won Florida this game. And we all know that Ole Miss's defense was weak last year, was on the weaker side. You could be an Ole Miss fan, and you could easily say that, because if you guys had a defense last year, you were looking at an elite ball team last year. So they lose to Florida first game of the season, then they go out and they beat Kentucky in overtime. I think that game was in Lexington. You lose to Alabama in a shootout. That was a very exciting game. This game was a lot closer than what the score says. The final score was 63-48, but I remember watching that game. Ole Miss was a touchdown away at some points in that game from being tied with Alabama late in the fourth quarter. It was an amazing game. You go next week, lose to Arkansas, then you lose to Auburn, but then you beat Vanderbilt on the road, you beat South Carolina, you beat Mississippi State, but then you lose to LSU in your final regular season game in a close game, 53-48. But then you finish out the season with a win against number 11 Indiana in the Outback Bowl. Indiana was so close to being a playoff, or they're close to making the Big Ten championship last year. They only lost to Ohio State, the same team that made the national championship, Ohio State, by 7 points. They only lost to them by 7 points. Indiana was a great team, and I think that this Ole Miss team is a really good football team, and a team that definitely I'm going to be high on this season. So if you're an outsider fan that's not an Ole Miss fan, and you're like, why is this kid so high on Ole Miss? Why on earth? Because we're going to get into wins, toss-ups, and losses, and this is by far the most interesting one I've done so far yet. Like, it shocked me how I did this and how many teams I put in one specific category, which you will see coming up, but it's my honest opinion. We got to get into Ole Miss's 2021 schedule, so let's pull that up on the screen. Starting off the season, not a Saturday, but on Monday, September the 6th, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, the Ole Miss Rebels take on the Louisville Cardinals. Then you go back home to take on Austin Peay. Austin Peay was the team who kicked off the college football season last year against Central Arkansas. I remember watching that game. Then you stay at home against Tulane, and then you have a really early bye week. September the 25th, you have a bye week. Then you go to Bryant-Denny Stadium in Alabama for October the 2nd and take on Alabama. Saturday, October 9th, you're back in Mississippi to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Then you go to Knoxville on the 16th to take on the Volunteers. Then you go back home to Oxford, Mississippi to take on the LSU Tigers. Then you're in Auburn on the 30th. Then you're back home on November the 6th to take on Liberty. Then you're still at home November 13th to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. You're still at home against Vanderbilt. And then to finish off the season, you have at Ole Miss at Davis Wade Stadium in the big rivalry game, the Big Egg Bowl on November the 27th. And then finally, I've put this in there for every single team just as a visual, but the SEC Championship is on December the 4th. Could Ole Miss get into back to, I can't even remember when the last time Ole Miss has made the SEC Championship, but can they get back there? Is that a realistic expectation for Ole Miss this season? I don't know. That's what we're going to get into today. We're going to discuss how Ole Miss is looking this season, some of the guys I pulled in with this class, and some of the guys that they lost this season. So now let's get into the losses and gains for the Ole Miss Rebels this season, because the turnover, it wasn't that bad. They got a lot of good guys returning, but they also lost a few guys who are going to be very key for this Ole Miss offense, especially. You look at Elijah Moore. I'm pretty sure he was leading in receiving at the end of the regular season in the SEC. He had an unbelievable season last year. Obviously, Devontae Smith would have passed him after because he played a couple more games. I think he played 2 more games in total. You have an extra playoff game in there, and then you have the SEC championship. So Devontae passes him, and then Kenny Yeboah. Kenny Yeboah is another guy that I think, even though he had his struggles last year, I remember watching a few games where he dropped some easy balls, but still, he was a pretty big piece of this offense last year for Ole Miss. I remember Kenny Yeboah playing my South Carolina Gamecocks, had a really, really nice game, and was just a guy that they constantly picked apart our defense with. So those are 2 guys, in my opinion, that I see big holes that are going to need to be filled for Ole Miss this season. You also look at guys like Royce Newman. You look at guys like Ryder Anderson, guys like that for Ole Miss to fill in those holes at those specific positions. Let's get into Ole Miss's offense, who they got this season, who I'm excited for this season. And I think the main guy, of course, you're going to look at who's their quarterback this season. I think he's the best quarterback in the SEC. I know Georgia fans are not going to be happy with me ever since I said that, because this is how I feel. Honestly, though, this is honestly how I feel. But they're going to say, no, JT Daniels is by far the best quarterback in the SEC. And I'd have to disagree with them, because Matt Corral has proven that he can play with the best. And when I mean the best, Matt Corral had an unbelievable season last year, and if it wasn't for him throwing those bunch of picks, I think it was like 5 or something against Arkansas, you would have seen this guy have some serious Heisman candidacy. Like, I'm not saying that he would have won it, but I think that he would have got in the voting somewhere. You would have had some people voting for him in the top 5. Matt Corral had a really good season last year. It was just the amount of picks that he threw in that one game really set off his touchdowns to interceptions ratio. Other than that, he had an unbelievable season. He had tons of yards. He was just pinpointing balls. Great deep ball passer, of course, to Elijah Moore, but he's gone this season. Well, let's look at the backfield for Ole Miss, because you got Ely and you got Snoop Connor both coming back, and I think that helps a lot for this Ole Miss offense. Ole Miss's rushing game last year was very good, and when you have a dual-headed monster in the backfield like Ely and Snoop Connor, I think that is going to help Ole Miss's passing game open up that much more for guys like Braylon Sanders. You got Dontario Drummond coming back, and then you got wide receiver, ex-quarterback, John Reese Plumlee coming in at quarterback, probably going to be the wide receiver, probably going to be wide receiver number 3. I think that he is an amazing player. He definitely has the athletic ability, but it just seems in this day and age in college football that if you cannot win the quarterback job, but you have the athleticism and the mobility, you're just going to walk right down that hall and step into the wide receiver room. It just seems like how it goes for offense in college football these days. Like, if you have the athleticism, they're going to find a spot for you on that offense, no doubt about it. And John Reese Plumlee, obviously a very athletic guy. He had struggles with his arm, but he could run the ball. No doubt about it. I'm guessing Casey Kelly's going to step in for Kenny Yeboah at tight end this season. But then you look at Ole Miss's defense. That was their struggle. Last season. But I think Sam Williams coming back, absolutely huge factor for them. Defensive end, I'm pretty sure led Ole Miss in sacks last season. You're going to have Tisdale. Those 2 guys are going to be your big guys up front. And the rushing game, plugging the holes, was something that was really tough for Ole Miss last year. They gave up a lot of yards rushing, so that's going to be absolutely key. But the secondary, I think the secondary is going to be fine. You got Reese, you got Smith, you got Finley. Those are going to be the main 3 guys, and I think that the secondary will hold up a lot better this season. You got experience back there. Just rely on it, trust on it, and you got to stop that rushing game. Somehow, you're going to have to rely on guys to plug the holes, especially the linebackers, because it's when the running backs get past that second level with the linebackers that they start getting in the secondary, and only bad things can happen from there. So now let's take a look just quickly at Ole Miss's recruiting class this season. Ole Miss finished 7th in the SEC. 7th in the SEC. They're in the top half of the SEC in recruiting, and that is no easy task at all. You're going to have Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, LSU always grabbing, like Florida even. Those 5 schools are all going to be grabbing multiple 5 stars. So even just those 5 schools alone, to be anywhere close to them in the recruiting rankings, I think is a huge accomplishment. And this class, just looking at it right now, is not bad at all. Not bad at all. You're adding a pro-style quarterback, 13th in the nation in Luke Altemeyer. 4-star, you got 7 4-stars on the squad, so you picked up some decent guys in recruiting. You're not at that 5-star level yet, but it will come. Lane Kiffin, if he keeps bringing up classes like this that continue to be in the top half of the SEC, Ole Miss is going to be a good football team in the future. I can guarantee you that. Hudson Wolf, tight end, 4-star, 8th best in the nation. Just going through some of the positions of the other 4-stars, you got Tysheem Johnson, safety, 16th best in the nation, and then you got another safety. You got a cornerback at a 4-star, and then looking at some of the guys who have signed their LOI, you got a D tackle, you got a wide receiver, and that finishes off for all the 4-stars. I think you have, I can't remember the number for the amount of 3-stars. It has to be somewhere in the, I think it was like 13, 15, something around there. But a good class, good solid class for Ole Miss, and just the beginning of what Ole Miss recruiting is going to start doing. The moment that you've all been waiting for, the moment that is the wins, the losses, and the toss-ups, and I cannot believe where this ended up. I cannot believe that it's this condensed in this one spot, but it's honestly how I feel. Now you have to interpret it. I'll bring it up on the screen now. You have to interpret it. The numbers at the bottom mean something. I had to put these percentages because too many people are just looking at where each team falls and then losing it at me in the comments. You have to listen to what I say. So please, before you comment anything, listen to what I had to say about all these games. I know it looks really weird because you have some games in the wins, you got a ton of games in the toss-ups, and then you got one automatic loss for the Ole Miss Rebels. So first off, starting off with the wins, I think Louisville is going to be a win this year. I think Austin Peay is going to be a win this year. I think Tulane's going to be a win this year. And I think Liberty is going to be a win this year. There is no... Oh, and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt too. That is 5 wins right there for Ole Miss this season. Mark it down. Those are your 5 wins. The rest of the SEC I'm putting in the toss-up category, excluding Alabama. And I have to tell you why. You have to look at that percentage down there at the bottom of that graphic. Because what is it? It's like 76 to 24%, or what is it? No, it's 74 to 26%. It's something like that. That's the win confidence that I have in Ole Miss this season. That's how confident I'm going to be in each game. And I'm going to go through each game so you guys understand where I'm coming at this, because I think there's a winnable or the favored part of the toss-up games and then the underdog part of the toss-up games. The favored part of the toss-up games, I'd say Arkansas. I'd say Mississippi State. Mississippi State was really close to being in the win category, and I know you guys are going to say Mississippi State sucks and they should not be in the toss-ups. I agree with you. I don't think Mississippi State's going to be good at all this year, but for a rivalry game in Mississippi State, in Starkville, I did not want to count that as an automatic win for the Ole Miss Rebels, but I'd say 70% confidence in Ole Miss taking that game home. You look at Arkansas, I'd give that favored for Ole Miss, probably like a 65-35. Tennessee, probably around the same thing. You go to Tennessee, though. That really scares me, but not that much. I'm still going like 60-40 for Ole Miss to win that game. And then I'd also take Ole Miss at Auburn as slight favorites, probably 60-40 there. I think LSU will be a true toss-up game. I see that as a true 50-50 game. That's a game that I have no clue. I'd have to see how this season is going to call that anytime soon. And then lastly, who's the last game? We got Texas A&M. Yes, the game is in Oxford, Mississippi. I would give a slight edge to Texas A&M in that game. I think Texas A&M is going to be a real good football team this year. And then last, you go to Alabama. Yes, Ole Miss played Alabama, probably the second best of any team in the nation last year, other than Florida. You go to Bryant-Denny. They've done it before. Ole Miss has done it before, but Alabama's always a tough place to win, and they are the best team in college football next season. So I'm going to mark that down as an automatic loss. So we go High ceiling, we go bottom floor, so worst case scenario, best case, worst case, and then realistic. Best case scenario, I say you have your 5 wins, you have your 5 automatic wins, and then how many do I have in the toss-ups? You'd have 6 exactly in the toss-up category. I say you win 5 of those. So you go 10-2. That's going to be best case scenario for the Ole Miss Rebels this season. I think punching through the ceiling, which is going even above the best case scenario, that's what I like to call punching through the ceiling, putting your hand through the ceiling, 11-1. But that is going to be a huge, huge shot. That's going to be a massive punch in the ceiling. You got to make a big hole for that to happen. Bottom floor, you go worst case scenario, you have your 5 wins still. I think that still happens. And then I think 7-5 is worst case scenario. I think you'll still come out with a win against Mississippi State, and you'll still come out with a win against Arkansas in worst case scenario. You might drop all the other games, but 7-5, you're making a bowl game. You're not too upset. Realistic. I'm gonna go 8-8. No, not 8-8. Sorry, that's football talk. That's NFL talk because you play 16 games. I'm gonna go 8-4, and then 8-4, 9-3. 8-4, 9-3 is my honest, realistic expectation for Ole Miss this season. I think they're going to be a real good football team. I honestly think that Ole Miss is going to be a really, really good football team. So that is my prediction for today, folks. Thank you so much for joining in. I really, really, really appreciate your time in watching this video. Stick around for the rest of the teams, and if you haven't watched all the rest of the SEC early predictions, definitely check those out. Like down below, comment anything about Ole Miss football. Definitely subscribe, and thank you for watching, and definitely come back next time.